Now on Manx Radio, our resident astronomer Howard Parkin gives us a heads up on what we can expect to see in the night skies of the Isle of Man in 2025. From eclipses to occultations, auroral displays to lunatics, in a conversation that was recorded last week. Well, it's always a delight to speak to Howard Parkin, who is the man that knows all about the night sky. However, we have an addition, because it's not just Howard Parkin anymore, it's Howard Parkin MBE. Do I have to speak to you differently now?
Well, I thought you might have bowed when I walked in, actually. I'm very disappointed, Chrissy.
How does it feel?
Surreal.
Yeah.
I learned about it a little bit before Christmas, and I had to keep it quiet, confidential, of course. And then when it was announced, I've just been overwhelmed by the response I've had from people. It really is touching and humbling and overwhelming and all those adjectives, because it's something I never expected. And to get it for what I love doing anyway is just a huge bonus. So thank you to everyone who listens and encourages me to keep going with it all. And I'm very, very pleased and, as I say, flattered.
It's a wonderful thing, isn't it, to be acknowledged for and for it to be noted how devoted you are to this subject and how much it's meant to you over the years and how much you have wanted to share it with the public. It's an acknowledgement of all of that, isn't it?
Well, that's what I've done. And as I say, I'm very privileged and I'm very lucky to get to do something I really love doing. And to be acknowledged in this way, well, as I say, that's just completely over the top and overwhelming.
So when do you go and pick up the little medal?
I don't know yet. I'm waiting for the notification, but I believe as a package comes through from Buckingham Palace or the Prime Minister. I don't know where it comes from, but it comes in the post inviting you to go along and be done. And it'll either be at Buckingham Palace or Windsor, and by one of the royal family. You don't know which either, but I don't mind where to go, who gives it. I'm just delighted to get it.
It's so exciting. It's so exciting. And you still come up to see us at Manx Radio.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Nothing's changed. I'm still the same as I am.
Well, it's lovely to see you, and especially in these particular circumstances. It's a fantastic start to the year, obviously.
Certainly was.
Yeah, and you've come in to talk about this year, it being 2025, because as you can imagine, there's lots going on in the night sky. So let's run through some of the highlights then. I know that one of the things that we often talk about is the meteor showers, which is something you can see with the naked eye, and it always blows my mind. It doesn't matter how many times I see it. What are the big meteor showers this year?
Well, one of the best ones this year we've just had on the 4th of January, unfortunately. And everyone forgets about the quadranted meteor shower because it always occurs around the 3rd, 4th of January. So we've missed that one. But make a note for next year. But the best two of the year are by far the Perseids in the meteor shower in August and the Geminid meteor shower in December. Those are by far the best two. There is a little bit of moonlight going to interfere with the Perseids this year. It's full on the 9th, so the moon will be pretty full. But it's still worth looking for because you do get some bright meteors. And those two meteor showers are always reliable. I always say, I do it when I do my show with Judith, I can guarantee if you go outside around midnight for about half an hour, get your eyes used to the dark, I will always guarantee you'll see at least one meteor. And it's never failed me yet. The weather has. We don't see any if it's cloudy, of course. But if the weather's clear, we do get some spectacular displays of the Perseids and the Geminids. There are others, of course. There's the Orionids in October. There's the Lyrids in April. They are probably the best 4 or 5. But the Perseids and the Geminids are by far the best too. And
it is magical. It's absolutely magical because essentially the little kid in you looks up to the sky and goes, shooting stars!
Got to wish on it, yeah.
Yeah.
I did a talk at school the other day and they were asking me what's the difference between a shooting star and a comet. And I said, well, a comet is miles and miles and miles away going round the sun. It just has a tail which you can see. Whereas meteors are bits of material impacting the Earth's atmosphere and burning up, giving this appearance of a shooting star. And I've seen a few over the years and they're well worth looking for. And like you say, it always fascinates people.
Mm-hmm. It really does. You mentioned comet. Of course, there was that comet towards the back end of last year.
Yes, there was a comet towards the end of last year, which didn't do as well as we'd hoped, but it was visible, and Comet Atlas. And there's another one coming around, but don't get too excited, because if this one survives its trip round the sun, it's going to, which is unlikely, because it's what we call a sun grazer. It goes so close to the sun, it'll just disintegrate. But if it doesn't, it'll be visible, but in the southern skies. So you need to be in Australia and South America and places like that to see it.
So be one of those that maybe look out for photos or video of it from the other side of the world.
If it does survive, it'll be quite newsworthy, and we'll look out for that one. But unfortunately, we're not going to see it from the Isle of Man.
But there were some sightings of it over here. That other one last year.
The other one. No, there certainly was. They were seen in the western sky after sunset, and they were quite good. It wasn't as good as the one we had in the year of COVID, Comet Neowise, or indeed Hale-Bopp, and the other one in about 1997. But always worth looking for comets because they're so special.
I remember all the news things about Hale-Bopp. I remember that, yeah.
We actually had two in quick succession. We had Hyakutake and Hale-Bopp within about 3 months of each other. So a lot of people's memory see the one as lasting a lot longer than it was. It was two entirely separate comets. But I often talk about them when I do my lectures, and sort of lovely pictures of them, including a great one over the mines in Foxdale from our observatory. So that was taken by a chap called Jake Huxley, a lovely picture, and I use that all the time. And I always say to people, incidentally, if you want to take pictures, and lots of people want to take pictures now, the aurora obviously is something we'll talk about in a moment, but if you take pictures of anything, put something in the foreground. Instead of just showing a sky of stars or whatever, if you put something in the foreground, it makes such a difference to the image.
It does. It gives you some scale, really, doesn't it? It really does. And, you mentioned the aurora, and it is incredible, isn't it, now that you can use just your phone to take photos of these things. Indeed. And not just take photos, I mean, the incredible displays we had last year, it was extraordinary. And I went out a couple of times and managed to see the Northern Lights several times. But just looking up at the sky and first of all seeing the rippling white that you could see, it was extraordinary. And then just holding your phone up and going, oh, that's what it looks like, that's what it is. I mean, what an experience.
It is amazing. And we've had some fantastic displays. Last October was, they say, the best display for about 70 years. So it's a lifetime event almost. But what I can tell you quite categorically is the aurora peaks the solar activity peaks every 11 years. And the peak is literally now. And traditionally, there's more activity following the peak than before the peak. Now, last year in May and October, we had two dramatic displays of aurora. There's already been a couple of displays in January already, not very big ones, but small displays, but visible from the island. And there's a very real possibility we're going to get some more aurora, significant displays of aurora in the next 12 months. So keep your eyes and ears peeled, because it may well happen in the next few weeks. March is always a good time for the aurora, as is September. They're usually the best times of the year for the aurora. And incidentally, the one in May last year was sort of just after March, and the one in October was just after September, the two equinoxes. So that's the time to look out for. But don't be misled, but go on the apps, go on the computers, look on the news. We are now able to predict auroras with far more precision than we used to. It's not an exact science, but we can work out there's likely to be a display of aurora, giving out 2 or 3 days notice. To be honest, when this activity happens on the sun, that leads to aurora on the Earth, possibly 2-3 days later. And that's how come we can predict it. And
that's what it is, because you had a lot of people last year saying, oh, that's because things are changing now with the climate, and that's why we can see it. But it's not, it's activity on the sun.
Absolutely nothing at all to do with the climate. No. I've been asked that before as well. Oh, we're getting more aurora because of climate change. No, we're not. It's to do with activity on the sun, which we don't have an effect on. The solar activity, we don't fully understand what happens on the sun. Hence the probe that went round the sun. You may have seen it in the news just before Christmas. The Parkin solar probe went round the sun. We're trying to learn more and more about it, because this auroral peak we're having now, or solar activity peak we're having now, was not predicted. We predicted it would be a low peak, and it's actually being a very high peak. And we don't understand why, but just marvel at it. Just look at it and have a good look for yourself. And as people have said to me, you don't need to go to Norway or Iceland or places like that. Stay in the Isle of Man and see it.
Exactly. And, as you mentioned, the apps are fabulous. I mean, I'm on a number of them, and there's one in particular, the alerts that come up, and it tells you when there is orange alert, red alert,
Aurora Watch UK is probably the best one.
Yes.
And ironically, that's based in Lancaster, which is just over the water, isn't it?
Yeah, so get yourselves onto those apps, and that's a really good way. And obviously, follow Howard. He'll be able to tell, not literally, don't just follow him down the street and say, when's the aurora? We'll, of course, keep you updated here on Manx Radio as well. So, I mean, that is exceptional. If we're going to get to see more aurora, it would be amazing in itself. But I've got a list here, Howard, of the highlights for 2025. Fascinating looking things on here, some of which are visible, some of which aren't. I'm intrigued by, and I know this isn't necessarily a visible one, but Saturn ring plane crossing. Can you explain that to someone who's just
unfortunately,
a layperson?
It sounds great, but unfortunately it's not, because what happens is Saturn's got this wonderful system of rings, and the rings are tilted because the planet is tilted on its axis like we are with our 23.5 degrees, and Saturn has a tilt as well. And the rings, when they're seen at their best, they're of course widespread. They're we can see them very clearly. But as Saturn goes around the sun and we go around the sun, of course, about every 11 years or so, the rings change from being the northern side of Saturn to the south. We cross over the plane of the line of what we call the line of the orbit of Saturn. And when that happens, the rings disappear because they just become a straight line. You can hardly see them. And that's happening this year twice because, of course, it happens twice when you go around the sun. And as a result, the rings will not be visible roughly in March time and again in November. They will be visible for a little bit in the middle, but it's going to be around the back of the sun then anyway. But we've got Saturn quite clear in the sky at the moment, and we were looking at the Saturn through the telescope a few weeks ago at the observatory, and the rings are almost invisible now.
Which, for someone who looks at it regularly, that in itself would be an incredible thing to see.
It's a huge loss. I mean, poor Galileo. I love the story about Galileo because Galileo discovered a telescope or made a telescope back in 1610. And he saw Saturn, but it was when we had a ring plane crossing when he was looking, and he could not work out why it was different, and he thought it was odd, and it wasn't until much, much, much later they realised what the rings were and how they are seen with all their majesty. But just at the moment, to take a breather from looking at Saturn's rings, but to see Saturn just as a disk, a bit like Jupiter or Mars is at the moment, is different. But leading on from that, we have at the moment got in the sky. There's been talk in the media about all the planets lining up in the sky. Well, it's not really true because what's happened is all the planets, bar Mercury, are all in the evening sky. Now, I'm sure lots of people have seen that very bright object in the sky over Peel. That's the planet Venus. Now turn round and look the other direction towards Douglas or out to sea. You'll see Mars and Jupiter just above it. You've got Mars, Jupiter and Saturn Venus, Jupiter and Mars very clearly visible in our skies. We've also got Saturn there and Uranus and Neptune, but Saturn's visible to the naked eye, the other two aren't. But if you imagine a line right across the sky is 360 degrees, you go under the Earth obviously, the planets are separated by about 170, 160 degrees, so they're not in a line. But hey, if people talk about it, I'm happy to explain what's going on. And indeed, the views you've got at the moment of Venus and of Jupiter and of Mars are fantastic.
They are. I mean, like you said, from Peel, we can see it's just, I mean, that really vibrant dot in the sky.
And it's still getting brighter. It's getting brighter and brighter. And eventually, what's happening, of course, is Venus is the other side, is inside the orbit of the Earth and the Sun. And what's happened, it's reached its furthest distance away from the Sun, and now it's going to start dropping down and pass between the Earth and the Sun, and then re-emerge in the morning sky from about August onwards. In the meantime, it's going to be lost in the glare of the sun. So we're going to have it now for about 5 or 6 weeks more. But you'll notice on a nightly basis, as the nights get lighter, you'll notice that Venus is setting or getting lower and lower towards the horizon. So make the best of it. And here's a challenge for you. People have often said you can actually look at Venus and cast a shadow. Venus will cast a shadow. Stand somewhere where there's no other light other than the starlight, obviously no street lights or anything else, with a white wall behind you or in front of you, and see if you can see a shadow.
It's that
a
bright.
A Venusian shadow. There you go.
Oh, that's so cool. I really want to do that now.
There you go. Find yourself a white wall and make sure there's only Venus visible. But Venus has got to be in a dark sky, which it only is when it's at what we call elongation. And it went through what we call elongation on the 10th of January, just a few days ago.
Do you find, out of interest, because I saw you popping up on one of the Facebook pages, I think it might have been the Aurora page recently, where someone had taken a photo of the moon and a bright dot beside the moon and said, can someone explain what this is? It was Venus. And you jumped up there and commented on that. Have you noticed more interest and activity online from people? There
is more interest in line. Astronomy has become a subject which it's been a sort of minority subject for many, many years, until about 20 years ago. And I think the growth of global consciousness and things like awareness of the climate and everything else, it's made people far more aware of the natural environment. The UNESCO biosphere is another aspect of that, if you like. And I'm noticing more and more people are wanting to know about astronomy. That's why I go on the cruises and talk about it, because people want to learn about it. And people are always saying, what's that bright star above the moon? It's Venus. And of course, literally a few days later, that bright star below the moon was Jupiter. And in fact, tonight, Mars is going to be below the moon as well, so it goes on. But we don't normally get bright planets in the sky at the same time like we've got now. We might get one if we're lucky. I mean, in about 3 months' time, we'll have no planets visible. And then we'll start again next September, October again, when Jupiter will come back round again and Saturn will come back round again. Venus will be in the morning.
Again.
Yeah, exactly. Venus will be in the morning sky and Mars disappears because Mars goes around the sun in 2 years, so we only see it every 2 years.
And then I'm guessing as well that I know we've talked in the past about folklore and history associated with events like this. I'm guessing the idea of the planets aligning, there must be people who react to that in a very different way.
Oh, totally a different way. And unfortunately, we do. But as I say, if people talk about it in any way, then they're interested. And I can obviously tell them about the astronomical sides of it rather than the astrological sides of it. What is fascinating, you talk about that, is Jupiter takes 12 years to go around the sun. And we go around the sun obviously once a year. But because Jupiter takes 12 years to go around the sun, it moves from one zodiacal constellation every year. So, for instance, it's in Taurus this year. Next year, it'll be in Gemini. Following year, it'll be in Cancer, and then Leo, and so on. So the connection between birth signs and the planets, that it gives people a real buzz. And I know the astrologers will be saying, oh, Venus, Jupiter's about to enter into Gemini and look out, whatever happens. Yeah. But that's a load of rubbish. But you can understand why all those people's years and years ago didn't understand why the planets did what they did. And therefore, this was attributed to astrological things. And there's me talking about astrology on Mike's radio. Dear me.
I know.
My colleagues will be shouting at their radios now.
But it is interesting because, like you said, there's a lot more people talking about these things. And I mean, one of the things a lot of people talk about, from teachers and policemen and all sorts, is the moon and the full moon having an effect on us. What do you make of that?
Funny you should say that, because I'm just putting together a new lecture for the cruises and everything else, and it's going to be about the moon, the return to the moon, but I'm also talking about the folklore of the moon and the stories about the moon, the word lunatic and the lunar cycle and days and nights and all that sort of stuff. The rabbit in the moon. Have you ever seen the rabbit in the moon?
No, I haven't.
We don't tend to see the rabbit very well from the Isle of Man because the moon is tilted at a different angle from the Isle of Man than it is from other places in the world. And the Sea of Tranquility and the Sea of Crises on the moon look like two rabbit's ears if you see the moon standing up. And the lunar rabbit, of course, is a very big thing in China.
Yeah.
And so when the Chinese went to the moon, they called their little rover Yutu. Yutu is the lunar rabbit.
Oh, I love that.
There you go.
So we need to look out for your new talks then to learn more about
Well,
that.
this is a brand new one. I'm still in the process of doing it. And I've just been putting in, would you believe we go from the lunar rabbit to Dark Side of the Moon by Pink Floyd?
Oh, yes.
How's that for a link?
That is wonderful. I might play that in a minute. Just
Absolutely.
Get that
Play
on.
Eclipse for me.
All right,
no Dark Side of the Moon. As a matter of fact, it's all dark.
I will do that. Well, we've heard it now. It's fine. What sort of lunar events can we expect this year?
Well,
then?
the moon is going to be quite exciting as well, because we've got a lunar eclipse on March the 14th. When the moon at moon set, when the moon is going down, we will see the moon being eclipsed. Now, when a lunar eclipse takes place, it doesn't get something passing in front of it, like we have the moon passing in front of the sun for a solar eclipse. The Earth's shadow is cast onto the moon. So the moon, which is normally when it's full of beautiful whitey silvery colour, goes red. The amount of red it goes depends on how much is going on in the Earth's atmosphere. Well, volcanic eruptions are taking place, for instance. The moon goes really a deep crimsony red, and we've got dust storms in the Sahara and things like that. So it's always well worth looking out for. We've actually got two. We've got March the 14th. We've got a total lunar eclipse occurring around 7 o'clock at night, and we've got another one taking place later in the year on September the 7th. But that one, I note from my notes, is basically in Asia and Pacific. I think we just get a glimpse of it, if I remember rightly. But we have got, of course, a very exciting thing taking place on March the 29th. We've got a solar eclipse. The sun is going to be 57% eclipse from the Isle of Man. So that'll be well worth looking out for, and we'll be able to see that very clearly from the Isle of Man. Assume the weather's decent. It's going to occur about lunchtime. But what I've got to say from the outset, if you want to look at a solar eclipse, make sure you've got a set of eclipse glasses.
Special glasses.
Or come to an Astronomical Society event or anything else. But I unfortunately won't be here for that one. I've booked to go on a cruise.
Of course you have.
And it's in Australia. The one place in the world where the eclipse is invisible. I couldn't believe it when I realised.
And we've talked so many times about how it's one of your favourite things in the world.
It is indeed. Unfortunately, this one I will not be seeing. But hey, Australia or stay here for an eclipse. It was a tough decision.
I'm sure it was not. So with regards to us then, seeing it from here, with our special glasses, of course, what will it actually look like?
Well, imagine the sun, the disk of the sun, or imagine a full moon if you like, but half of it will be missing. But it won't be a flat line like you get at lunar phases. It'll be like the big, huge bite has been taken out of the sun. And as I say, it's going to be as much as 57%.
So will it get dark?
No, it won't get dark, but it'll be noticeable quite easily. If there's a bit of cloud cover, you'll notice it very easily. But if you want to look at the sun properly, you must use eclipse glasses. But when I saw the total eclipse in Texas last year, I actually did as an experiment for myself. while I was watching the total eclipse taking place, at what point did the darkness change? Did the light level change? And you know it was about 2%. Once you got down to the last 2% of sunlight, that's the moment when you notice this strange and eerie, yellowy, dark light. But you do need to get right down to the final percentages. But don't worry, Chrissy, we've got a total eclipse taking place from the Isle of Man.
Go on.
In 2151.
Oh, for goodness sake.
And if you missed that one, there's another one in 2200.
Need a Futurama cryogenic type thing to go on.
We need to
so
freeze,
that we can
freeze something, I think.
So we can witness that one. So what else are you excited about this year?
Well, there's quite a few what we call occultations taking place as well. Now, an occultation is nothing to do with
witchcraft.
Ghosts and witchcraft and all that sort of stuff. It's basically when the moon or one object passes in front of another. An eclipse of the sun is technically speaking an occultation. It's when the moon passes in front of the sun. We had a moon occulted the planet Saturn on January the 4th, which we all missed. But we've got another one on September the 19th. We've got a moon occulting Venus. Now, it's in daylight, but as you know, you can see the moon in daylight. So what I'm going to say to people to do in September is get your telescopes out. You will need a telescope. Look at the moon through a telescope in broad daylight at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And the planet Venus, as you know, is very, very bright. You'll even see that in daylight, especially if you've got a telescope on it. And you'll see all of a sudden Venus will just disappear and then re-emerge about an hour later. And that's always quite special to look at. The best ones I've ever seen is Saturn, when Saturn goes, because the rings, of course, peep out before the planet does. They're really good to see. But there's always something going on. In some respects, this year hasn't got anything really spectacular like a total eclipse or anything like that. But there's always something to look for. And there's the meteor showers we've already mentioned, and all the planets. And, of course, if anything else happens, like a comet or an auroral display, which is very likely to happen, the aurora especially, I'll always be telling the newsroom and anyone who wants to listen, and happy to put something out on Manx Radio to let people know.
And of course, you've got the Society, the Astronomical Society. What have you got on this year? Any more events?
We're very pleased to meet people at the Astronomical Society Observatory, the James Martin Observatory up in Foxdale. We meet on the first Thursday of every single month. We always have a review of what's going on in the night sky and then possibly a speaker. We had a fantastic speaker over in December talking about the Euclid mission. Which is a satellite the European Space Agency launched. And this guy's from the Isle of Man. He's a professor at Edinburgh University. So we do on occasion get visiting speakers as well. But what we tell everybody, if anyone wants to come along on the first Thursday of every month, they're more than welcome. We're doing a lot of work at the observatory at the moment. We're trying to make it more professional, should I say. We're getting more equipment in there. We've got solar panels operating it now. Not totally, but certainly we're using solar power and going green, as it were. And it's just a great opportunity to talk to people who want to know about it as well. And there's always something to talk about. There's always something going on in the sky. And if anybody is interested, if they want to send an email to yourself, Chrissy, at Manx Radio, I'd be more than happy to forward this. It's a 6-sheet document telling everyone what's visible in the night sky in 2025.
Yeah, it is. It is brilliant. It's very thorough and really good. I mean, I'm intrigued to know if you have many young people coming to see you at the observatory.
Not as many as we'd like. I will be honest with you. I do lots of talks at schools. I did Vic Road School only yesterday, which was quite funny because they were asking me all sorts of embarrassing questions.
What was the most fun question?
The most fun question that you get is, are there aliens?
Yeah.
I always surprise them and say yes, because I'm convinced there's life elsewhere in the universe, but they no more come to us than we go to them. Quite often get asked about black holes, and I love talking about black holes because I want to tell people a black hole is not a black hole. It's an object so dense that light can't escape from it. It is not a hole you can fall into and white holes and emerge in another universe and beam you up Scotty and all that sort of stuff. But it amazes me. I'm talking to 10, 11-year-olds usually. They're nearly always upper primary school children. And the questions they come up with, the stuff they know. You know, I'll say something about a star, and that star's got a companion. It's called Beta, Gamma, whatever.
Really?
And how do they know this? And it's again, I look back on my own career and my own interest in astronomy over the years, and mine started. I tell people, I get asked all the time, when did I become interested in astronomy? And I became interested in astronomy when Yuri Gagarin went into space in April 1961. Showing my age now, you see. And that always fascinates them. And then they ask us what always gets me, you do a talk to an adult group, you get 1 or 2 questions. Usually 1 or 2. I don't mind if you don't get any. Sometimes you don't get any. But you go to a school, every child wants to ask a question.
Isn't that encouraging?
Oh, I love it. And that's what I get the feedback. That's where I get the feedback, and I enjoy it because they like me talking about it. I talk about it more, and then more schools invite me. More people invite me to do talks, and it just self-perpetuates all the time.
It is great to know because I guess, you mentioned the likes of Gagarin and, in the 60s, the events that were happening with regards to space were, unbelievable.
They were,
and
literally.
So I can understand how that would inspire that in you, whereas, of course, it really isn't happening so much now.
No, but every now and then we get a spectacular. We weren't going to talk about spaceflight as such, but SpaceX are launching their rocket. They're launching it tonight, actually.
As we speak, yeah.
As we speak. Whether it go on at a time, whether it's delayed or whatever. But this is the one where they caught the thing. They actually caught the rocket in mid-flight. And
unbelievable.
Absolutely incredible. And, of course, they're talking about going back to the moon. That's why I'm doing this new lecture. They've delayed the mission from 2025 to 2026 now. But after that, the next one after that, they're going to go back to the surface of the moon, and men and women will be walking on the surface of the moon. Certainly, I would guess within the next 3 or 4 years, certainly.
To be fair, it is crazy to think they haven't done it since however many years ago, isn't it?
Political. It's all down to politics and money, but now there's a real drive to do it. And I think they've got to such an extent now that they can't pull the plug on it now like they did back in about the early 2000s, and it's only a matter of time. And when they do, of course, it'll be all over the media and everything else.
Would you want to go?
Oh, absolutely. There's a lot of people said they'd buy me a one-way ticket, but that's not nice.
How rude.
Exactly.
Well, as ever, Howard, it's a real joy speaking to you. Howard Parkin, MBE, we should say. I doff my cap to you. We're very pleased for you, and thank you so much for sharing this with us.
It's my absolute pleasure.
Do get yourselves over to the Astronomical Society, and you have your own pages people can follow you on, don't you?
Yes, Salman Astronomical Society. We have 2 pages. We have our members page and we have a general page as well. So if you're a member and you pay your subs, you can have access to the members page. So.
Oh, it's worth it.
And it's only about £30 odd. I can't remember what the figure is now, but it's only about £30. You get, it's not even a price of a meal out these days.
It's access to space.
Exactly. And believe me, you think I'm enthusiastic. There's a lot of people there who are equally enthusiastic, and some very, very knowledgeable people as well. And I love it, and long may it continue.
And you get to have a go on the big telescope.
Oh, absolutely.
Well, it's worth it.
A cup of tea and a look for the telescope. What more could you ask for?
Quite right. Howard Parkin, as ever, thank you so much.
My pleasure, Christy.